Deep into the night, a critically ill pregnant woman was rushed to the hospital, accompanied by none other than my husband, who had claimed to be on a business trip. The patient's condition was dire, and my husband even knelt down to beg me to save her. Heartbroken but maintaining my professional ethics, I performed a surgery that lasted over 10 hours, finally bringing her and her baby out of danger. At the end of it all, my husband grabbed my neck in fury and shoved me down the stairs. Why did the surgery take so long? You can't give birth yourself, so you have to go and harm someone else's child. You're so vicious. He didn't know that I was pregnant too. And with that push, our child, whom we had been longing for 6 years, was gone. The premature labor was caused by their excessively intense sexual activity. The nurse was still loudly scolding the man, but he suddenly knelt down in front of me and called out, "Wife," he said, "I know I'm sorry, but the baby is innocent. Saving lives is your duty. Your body can't support pregnancy, and you couldn't be a mother anyway. You can't let Amy lose her child too," Woozy said confidently, with panic and loss in his eyes, but no guilt or pain. "We've been married for 6 years, and the lack of children has always been a pain in my heart. I suffered a lot to prepare for pregnancy, but he kept saying he didn't mind not having children. But he had already had someone else outside. Even when the other woman was pregnant, he couldn't control himself, and in the heat of the moment, he caused her to go into premature labor. I subconsciously touched my abdomen. I hadn't even had time to tell him. Actually, there was a little life in here too. Yumi, Woozy interrupted me loudly. You wouldn't be so vicious as to let her die, would you? You're a doctor. As long as you save her, I'm willing to live a good life with you from now on. Otherwise, don't force me to divorce. He tried to threaten me. I turned cold and raised my hand to call the nurse to prepare for surgery. As a doctor, I will abide by the medical ethics I should, and I will definitely get a divorce. The surgery lasted 11 hours, during which I had a faint abdominal pain, fearing that something was wrong with the baby. But I had to concentrate on the surgery and could only endure the pain. Finally, both mother and child were safe, but the premature baby was malnourished and was sent to an incubator for observation. I finally breathed a sigh of relief and took off my surgical gown and hurried out. The abdominal pain became more and more severe, and I was afraid that it was a sign of losing the baby. I had to find a nurse immediately. Unexpectedly, as soon as I walked out of the operating room, I was grabbed by the neck and pressed hard against the wall. Yumi, you vicious woman. Woozy seemed to be crazy, his eyes red as he roared. 11 hours of surgery, what did you do? He was so strong that I couldn't breathe and could only struggle, squeezing a few words from my throat. I didn't. You're still arguing. He was almost irrational, and he said viciously, you dawdled for 11 hours, trying to kill Amy and her child in this way. Yumi, I won't let you go. He made too much noise, and soon someone came to stop him. The little nurse was so anxious that she was almost in tears, loudly rebuking him. Are you crazy? Yumi is a skilled doctor with a strong sense of professional ethics. She would never do such a thing. Besides, she's your wife. Don't you trust her at all? As he pushed and shoved, he let go of me, and I lost my support and fell to the ground. The abdominal pain became more and more severe, and I didn't even have the strength to stand up. I could only protect my stomach with one hand and grab the other person's pants leg. Take me, I said with difficulty. Emergency save. Heh, Woozy sneered. You're really acting like it in front of outsiders. If you're really so uncomfortable, how can you have the strength to do an 11-hour surgery? You like acting so much, I'll let you act enough. After saying that, he kicked me in the stomach. The pain at that moment almost made me faint. Still not getting up? Woozy pressed. I'll see how long you're going to act. As he said that, he was about to continue, and my vision went dark. Even the hand that was protecting my stomach was too weak to lift. Just then, someone came out of the ward and shouted, Who is Amy's family member? The patient is awake. The expression on Woozy's face immediately changed, full of excitement. Before leaving, he looked down at me condescendingly and sneered. Just stay here and reflect on yourself. When you've reflected enough, come and apologize to Amy. With that, he left. I was too weak to argue, so I could only weakly grab the nurse's hand and say intermittently, "I need emergency, save the baby." A colleague from the same department, wearing a stethoscope, opened the examination instrument, and after a brief examination, told me anxiously, "The situation is not good. There is a risk of losing the baby. You need to be prepared mentally. We'll start an infusion first, and then we need to have emergency surgery." I gently touched my abdomen. Tears welled up in my eyes, and my heart felt like it had been hollowed out, leaving only blood flowing. "Wizzy, if you knew I was carrying your child, would you regret treating me this way?" Meanwhile, Wizzy was in Amy's ward, holding her tightly. They were immersed in the joy of the new life's arrival, cuddling and being affectionate. Until Wizzy said, "Yumi has been unable to get pregnant all these years, and I was afraid that out of jealousy, she would retaliate against you during the surgery. Now that I see you're okay, I'm finally relieved." Amy's eyes shifted, and after a while, her eyes gradually turned red. She said, "Yumi did save my life, but our child is in the incubator because of this surgery. I'm not doubting her, but the child is innocent. I know she hates me, but it's your child too. How could she be so cruel?" As she spoke, a few tears fell, so convincing as if I, who had just performed a heart-wrenching surgery to save her, had really committed some heinous crime. Wizzy was heartbroken, his eyes filled with anger. He held her hand tightly. "Amy, don't be afraid. With me, no one can hurt you and the child. I'll make Yumi pay." At this moment, a nurse happened to come in. She held the surgical order and hurriedly found Wizzy. "Wizzy, Yumi's condition is critical now, and she needs to go to the emergency room for surgery immediately. A family member's signature is required." Wizzy was stunned when he heard this and asked the nurse, "Surgery? What's wrong with her?" The nurse was both anxious and angry, and was just about to say something. But at this moment, Amy interrupted. She tightly covered her heart. Her face showed a painful expression, and she leaned weakly on Wizzy. "Wizzy, my wound hurts so much. I don't know if there is something wrong with the suture, or if it has cracked. Doctor, I need a doctor to help me." Wizzy immediately became nervous when he heard this, and no longer paid attention to the nurse. He stood up abruptly. "I'll go find a doctor for you right away." When he rushed out of the ward, I was lying on the hospital bed, so weak that I was almost unconscious, and was being pushed by my colleagues to the emergency room. "Yumi," Wizzy called out to me as soon as he saw me. The surrounding nurses knew he was my husband, and thought he was finally going to sign for my surgery, so they all stopped. Unexpectedly, Wizzy pulled out the needle from the back of my hand, and then grabbed my wrist, trying to pull me off the bed. "Enough, Yumi, how long are you going to act? Come down now and help Amy with her wound." All the doctors present were incredulous. The nurse tried to protect me and shouted at Wizzy, "Are you crazy? Yumi is in critical condition, and if she doesn't go to the emergency room immediately, the consequences will be unimaginable. This is the last emergency room. Let go of Yumi quickly, she is your wife." Wizzy was stunned at first, then he showed a look of sudden realization. "I see, Yumi, this is all part of your plan. You bribed these people to act with you, just to occupy the emergency room and prevent Amy from going in." As he said this, he tried even harder to drag me off the bed. The pain in my abdomen had become very severe, and I had no strength to resist him. I could only use the last bit of my strength to tightly protect my belly. "Let me go." My eyes filled with despair. "Wizzy, you will regret it." But he turned a deaf ear, and the disgust on his face deepened. "How long are you going to act? You just make me sick. And all of you. What means did she use to make you willing to act with her until now? The last emergency room must be given to Amy." With that, he pulled me and I fell heavily from the bed to the floor. I was so painful that my eyes went black, and I didn't even have the strength to scream. But Wizzy was still unwilling to let me go, and forcibly pulled my arm, wanting me to get up and treat Amy's wound. I had no strength at all, and I could only be dragged by him all the way. More and more people gathered around, all talking and gossiping, and Wizzy became even more impatient, rebuking me. "How long are you going to pretend? I'm going to make everyone see your true face." After saying that, he let go of my hand and pushed me hard. He fully believed that I, who was acting, would have the strength to stand firm, and then he could reveal my true colors to everyone. Unexpectedly, the moment he let go, I fell down the stairs like a broken kite. I tried to protect the child in my belly, but I didn't even have the strength to lift my hand. Blood spread out from under me, my stomach ached, and it felt like my internal organs had been displaced by the fall. I let out a broken and painful moan. I could feel something slowly slipping away. This was my child, my first child, and it was gone just like that. Someone screamed, "Blood! Yumi is bleeding." How could this be? Woozy also looked incredulous, took 2 steps back in panic, and then seemed to think of something and said urgently, "I see, there must be a blood bag in her belly. She is best at pretending to be pitiful and gaining sympathy. It must be like this." As he spoke, he ran down the stairs and shouted into my ear, "Yumi, I've given you a chance, and you just don't appreciate it." Then he reached out to pull down my pants, muttering, "When I find your blood bag, everyone will know your true colors." Enough! The little nurse in the hospital who had the best relationship with me squeezed out of the crowd and shouted at him hoarsely, "How can you do this to her? Don't you know that Yumi is pregnant with your child?" This sentence made Woozy stop abruptly. What? The security guards took the opportunity to subdue him immediately, and other colleagues did not dare to delay, and quickly took me away. I could no longer support myself and passed out. When I woke up, I was in a regular ward, but my body was already extremely weak. "Wife, you're finally awake." I turned my head, and Woozy quickly came over and took my hand. "Are you hungry? I'll go buy you something to eat." I rejected and pulled my hand back, and my annoyance made me not want to answer. And I didn't want to see him either. Seeing this, Woozy softened his tone and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" As he spoke, he was about to touch my face, and I immediately turned my head to avoid him. His hand closed and tightened, falling helplessly on the bedside. "Yumi, I was a little impulsive yesterday. I apologize to you. I really didn't know you were pregnant." Thinking of my unborn child, who was kicked to death by his own father, I was filled with grief and anger, and the resentment in my heart surged like a tide. "Woozy, let's get a divorce." "What are you talking about?" He was incredulous. I met his gaze firmly and repeated, "Let's get a divorce." "Woozy, we've been married for 6 years. We've been trying to conceive since the day we got married. How many nasty looks your mother gave me, calling me a hen that doesn't lay eggs. How many Chinese medicines did she make me drink? How many examinations did I have? Didn't you see it all? You don't know how hard it was to conceive this child." Woozy tried to argue. "Then how did Amy get pregnant so quickly? In the end, isn't it because your body is too weak to get pregnant? My mother took you to see doctors. Wasn't it for your own good? Wasn't it for our little family? Do you want my Song family to have no descendants?" I suddenly laughed angrily. Was it me who couldn't give birth? In the 8 years we've been together, this isn't the first time I've been pregnant. The last child was the one you begged me to abort. At that time, I asked for a divorce. I felt that he didn't have a sincere intention to go on with me, so he would choose to kill our child at the first opportunity to prove that he didn't love me much. But he begged me to get back together like crazy, knelt on the ground and promised me again and again, saying that when we were both settled, we would consider having children. It's too early now, but later, he almost took measures every time, and occasionally when my menstrual period was late, he would get angry and ask me if I hadn't taken the medicine. Woozy's mother thought I couldn't bear children, but Woozy never said a word for me, and he often scolded me for that, saying, "A hen that doesn't lay eggs." However, at that time, I was so in love that I didn't take these things to heart. This time I was pregnant. I thought it was a gift from heaven, but I didn't expect it to make me realize the reality earlier and stop the loss in time. The man I tried to protect with all my heart stabbed me in the back. "Yumi, I said the wrong thing. I didn't mean to blame you." A trace of guilt appeared on his face. "Yesterday was my fault, but Amy won't threaten you. The position of Mrs. Song will only be yours." Seeing that I was indifferent, he became a little anxious. "I'm not with her like you think. It was only that one time. I was drunk that day, and she told me she was pregnant not long ago. You know how anxious my family is to have a grandson, and I want a child too." "Yumi, I was confused for a moment. But you did something wrong too. That was my first child. And it could have been born healthy. I didn't think you were such a jealous woman. So I sent you to your hospital to deliver the baby. Who would have thought? I sneered. What if I say that I didn't do anything during the surgery, and she slandered me? Wizzy frowned even deeper. Yumi, that's enough. If I hadn't spoken well of you in front of Amy, you would have been fired from the hospital by now. So you don't believe what I said? He took a deep breath, as if suppressing his emotions. Your body is not well now, and I won't argue with you. Amy is simple and kind, but that's not a reason for you to bully her. We are all adults, and if we do something wrong, we do something wrong. Don't admit it and blame others. Don't let me look down on you. I sneered. Then since that's the case, I'll take the initiative to make room for your Amy. What are you unhappy about? Wizzy stood up abruptly, his eyes a little evasive. I know you're in a bad mood now and you're acting out of anger, but I won't divorce you. You can calm down first. Before I could say anything else, he left in a hurry. As soon as he left, I asked my lawyer friend to draft 2 divorce agreements, reminding him, there is only one request. I want to get a divorce as soon as possible. The other side replied quickly, okay, to reassure me and get married. Wizzy had promised me before marriage that, as long as he had any signs of infidelity, he would give up all his public property and leave the house with nothing. At that time, Wizzy looked at me with love in his eyes. He was sure he would keep his promise to love me. Unfortunately, promises change in an instant. For the next few days, Wizzy came to the hospital early every day. No matter how ugly my face was, he stayed with me. I sent the prepared divorce agreement to Wizzy, but he still didn't respond. I didn't mind, he could drag, and I could naturally afford to wait, just to see if Amy could hold on. Sure enough, on the day I was discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law came over. As soon as she entered the door and saw her son coaxing me, she was furious. Son, don't be humble to this woman. We don't want a hen that doesn't lay eggs in our family. Song Wenjing turned around in surprise. Mom, why are you here? His mother glanced at me and said reproachfully, if it weren't for Amy telling me about the child, how long were you going to hide it from me? Then she took Amy's hand and sat down. Amy, you just gave birth. You are a great contributor to our Song family. Sit down quickly, don't be tired. The word Amy was called very affectionately. Since we got married, my mother-in-law has always been dissatisfied with me, and she has never been as gentle as she is now. Amy said softly, thank you, Auntie, for your concern. What are you calling me, Auntie? You should call me Mom. Speaking of this, she seemed to remember my existence again and turned the spearhead at me. You can't even give birth to a child, and you still want to monopolize my son. Get a divorce quickly. In the past, for the sake of his mother, even if she was very cold to me, I chose to endure it. But now it's different. I directly took out the divorce agreement and threw it in front of them. Now it's not that I don't want to leave, it's that your son is unwilling to sign. If you want to leave, just sign it happily. He has a child with a woman of the night. I feel dirty. A man's rescue of a fallen woman is simply engraved in his bones. Let alone this fallen woman is his former white moonlight. Amy rejected him because he was poor and left Wizzy back then. I thought that after studying abroad for a few years, she would have higher standards, but I didn't expect her to drop out of school after a year abroad and quietly return to China. As a result, there was a change in her family, and she had no choice but to take a wrong path. Originally, I was still sympathizing with her situation, but Amy was not a law-abiding person. She has ruined countless families over the years, basically intervening and then running away with the money. Compared to sympathizing with her, I sympathize more with the women who lost their families because of her. Am I wrong? You've been selling yourself for so many years and finally met your old lover. Are you ready to wash your hands? Amy was about to yell at me, but when she turned around and saw Wizzy standing aside, her expression changed, and she threw herself into Wizzy's arms and cried, Brother Wizzy, although my family fell into decline back then, I was innocent when I was with you. She slanders me like this. I can't live anymore. As she spoke, she was about to hit the wall. Wizzy's face immediately turned gloomy. Yumi, don't go too far. I've given you enough face. Is she my child's mother? I don't allow you to insult her like this. I sneered and pushed the divorce agreement in front of him. You love her so much. Why don't you sign it quickly? Sign it, just sign it, don't regret it. Regret? I regret not divorcing him sooner. After the deal was settled, with Amy and Woozy's mother present, they immediately demanded to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Because he was the wrongdoer, he took away a large part of his property. Woozy's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot, and his mother was cursing and scolding because she was heartbroken over the money. There was no way, who made her precious grandson anxious to register. If they didn't get a divorce for a day, Amy's child would be an illegitimate child. They could only compromise, and Woozy's family was afraid that I would go back on my word. So they found someone to rush the divorce certificate. After getting the certificate and taking the money, I was in a good mood. Seeing this, Woozy, who had just lost a large sum of money, turned green with envy. Yumi, are you so happy to divorce me? Are these 6 years of relationship fake? I sneered disdainfully. If you hadn't had a child behind my back, I might have been deceived by you for a longer time. Since Woozy insisted on finding trouble with me, I naturally wouldn't be a saint and leave him any face. The surrounding people's contemptuous eyes were all on Woozy. Instantly, Woozy's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. His mother, who was an old hand at this, immediately started cursing, and the words she used were all different. I ignored Woozy's mother's crazy scolding and turned to leave. Of course, I wouldn't be so stupid as to remind them of the fact that they were raising someone else's child. The next day, I returned to work at the hospital feeling quite cheerful. Yumi, the dean wants to see you. A nurse knocked on the door outside the clinic. Looking at my supervisor's expression, I had a bad feeling. Yumi, you've been working in this hospital for 8 years, and I know you've always been dedicated. But someone has reported you for medical malpractice, saying you harmed a patient and their child. Yumi, I know you wouldn't do something like that, but the public opinion is very strong now, and your job may be suspended. But don't worry, once the final result comes out, we will definitely clear your name. I looked at Amy's social media account, and in just a few days, she had already gained hundreds of thousands of followers. To completely destroy me, Amy was spreading rumors online about my medical skills and fabricating lies about me harming her child during surgery. She started live broadcasts on major social media platforms, pouring out her miserable experiences with tears in her eyes. The doctor who performed my cesarean section was my husband's ex-wife. I thought she wouldn't hurt a child, but now my son is still in the incubator because of improper surgery. Amy cried with tears in her eyes. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembled, and she kept wiping away the non-existent tears with a tissue. She cleverly used people's sympathy, presenting so-called evidence, some blurry, selective screenshots of hospital documents, and her own fabricated descriptions of her child's illness. For a time, public opinion on the internet surged towards me like a tidal wave. This kind of doctor has no medical ethics and should have her medical license revoked. To hurt an innocent child for money, that's terrible. How can she live with a clear conscience? She must give the victim an explanation. On the internet, she portrayed herself as a gentle, wealthy, and pitiful housewife, while I became the image of an old, cruel, and heartless abandoned wife. Even Woozy's betrayal seemed reasonable in the eyes of her fans. Amy revealed some information about me in the video, and soon someone dug up my social media account. I simply turned off the private message function, and then called Woozy. His voice was tired, but as soon as he heard my voice, he immediately became excited. Wife, is there something you need from me? I corrected him. Woozy, we've already divorced. Your wife is now Amy. She's spreading rumors online and reporting me to the hospital, seriously affecting my life. You'd better deal with it, otherwise I'll take my own measures. Woozy said helplessly, she's only doing this for the child. If your medical skills were excellent, the child wouldn't suffer. I hung up the phone, knowing that arguing was useless at this point, and those netizens who were blinded by anger would not listen to my explanation. They were only willing to believe the lies that Amy made up. Amy, since you enjoy this persona so much, then I'll slowly reveal your true face. Public opinion fermented more and more violently, and more people were cursing me. At this time, I received a text message that was particularly eye-catching. Amy is not a good person at all. The child she gave birth to is not Woozy's. Along with it were various photos and evidence. The content was extremely stimulating, so I contacted that person. I didn't expect Woozy and Amy to get married so soon. Amy found me and showed off triumphantly in front of me. She took out the wedding invitation with Woozy and waved it in front of me. Yumi, look, Woozy and I are going to get married, and you, on the other hand, are just a failure despised by everyone. Her eyes were full of malice and mockery, and her face made me feel extremely disgusted. Seeing my calm expression, Amy thought I was just putting on a brave face. But only I knew that Amy was just a grasshopper in autumn and couldn't jump around for a few more days. On the day of her and Woozy's wedding, I revealed all the evidence of Amy destroying other people's families when the wedding reached its climax. The big screen suddenly showed Amy's disgraceful past. Photos, videos, and testimonies from victims were all displayed in front of everyone, including the fact that she was still sleeping with other men before her wedding with Woozy. The guests were in an uproar, and the originally festive atmosphere instantly became awkward and chaotic. Woozy stood there dumbfounded, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Amy was panicked and screamed as she lunged towards the screen, trying to turn it off. "This is all fake, Yumi framed me." And then I provided DNA comparison evidence of Woozy and Amy's child, proving that the child was not Woozy's. The Song family was in a state of collapse at this time. They started fighting with the Lin family. At that moment, Woozy and his family seemed to realize something suddenly. The moment the car drove away, Woozy chased after me. "Yumi, let's talk about this properly. Let's talk properly. We've been together for 6 years after all. Don't we even have a chance to talk seriously?" I simply sent Woozy the results of the sperm test, showing his low sperm count, and the DNA test of my child. Actually, when I first got pregnant and went for a checkup, I knew roughly about Woozy's condition. Because the first child was not developing very well, the doctor suggested that Woozy and I both have a checkup. I knew Woozy very well. If I told him it was this kind of checkup, he definitely wouldn't do it. The final result was the same as I guessed. The sperm survival rate was extremely low. So for these 6 years, it wasn't that I deliberately wanted to avoid contraception, but that it was simply difficult to conceive. The child who was destroyed by Woozy's own hands might really be his last child. It's just that he himself didn't expect that the child was killed by himself. With the revelation of the truth, public opinion began to reverse. Those netizens who had previously spoken ill of me began to apologize and condemn Amy's hypocrisy and malice. Amy was imprisoned for fraud and defamation. The hospital also cleared my name at that time, but I still resigned and submitted an application for a Doctors Without Borders. My parents both died in the war zone, and I've always wanted to carry on their legacy. It's just that I gave up because of Woozy before. Now I should also pursue my life's pursuit. English translation: I didn't tell Woozy about going abroad, for fear that he would follow me. But when I was checking in, he chased after me with a bouquet of flowers and got down on one knee to propose. "Wife, I really know I was wrong. Wherever you go, I'll go. Will you marry me again?" The onlookers who didn't know the situation shouted for me to marry him. But I was indifferent, even a little angry. "Woozy, I won't marry you. Let's leave each other with some dignity," I said calmly. "We're already divorced." Woozy seemed not to hear me and interrupted urgently. "I was deceived by Amy. It was all my fault. I'm sorry to you. I promise I'll never do it again. Just come back with me. Let's live a good life together in the future." He took out an exquisite jewelry box from his pocket. He eagerly opened the box and showed it to me. Inside was a small pinky-sized diamond ring. It was the diamond ring I had longed for but never received. "Wife, I said that when I have money, I will definitely buy you a big diamond ring. I bought the diamond ring. Let me put it on for you, okay?" He gestured to grab my hand and put it on. I stepped back and refused. Woozy's eyes were filled with pain. "Wife," he tried to maintain a smile and said with his head up, "Are you still blaming me for hitting you? I was a jerk. I was confused. You hit me back. You can hit me however you want, okay?" As long as you can forgive me. I turned my head and said coldly, "Stop acting. I'm really tired. Let's just go our separate ways." Woozy's face turned pale, and he was full of pleading. "Woozy, our relationship ended the moment you cheated." After saying that, I turned and left without looking back. No matter what kind of relationship, when the affection is exhausted, the fate will come to an end. Blame yourself and leave gracefully. Any relationship, in the end, is just a chance encounter. Those who care will feel burdened, and those who don't care will not care. Love is voluntary, and there is no regret. Don't talk about owing. Don't let go of the encounter. Some people come from the sea of people, and they will eventually return to the sea of people.